new ways of doing that other than, showing a quick video clip or having someone walk around and tour the building. So what are some engaging ways to do that? And I think one of the most interesting ARGs that we designed was for Constellation Academy of Wine. We designed an ARG for their sales training department. And so we were teaching wine sales reps more about their products and how to better relate to their customers. And I think those two applications, kind of looking at building sales skills and doing some orientation type ARGs, are probably where we're headed with a lot of the gameplay and the conversations we're having now. I mean, I think more and more organizations, there's been the huge gamification trend that, everyone knows what Foursquare is, and well, most people do. And there's been a lot of talk about the gamification of health. We're talking to some organizations around creating health games and how to better manage or treat certain disease states using game mechanics and ARGs. And so those types of things are becoming more and more common. I think people are really looking at games as a way of addressing social issues. Jane McGonigal's book, Reality is Broken, certainly is helping that along as well. I saw her on Stephen Colbert and was so excited.
Now,
and just there's a lot more awareness of games as a way of teaching and learning.
Now, I know you do a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, and I know how protective they are of their firewalls and everything else you can possibly imagine. So when you're dealing with an organization, like a pharmaceutical company, how do you implement an augmented reality game in that kind of environment where, it's almost forbidden to touch your cell phone or go outside the firewall or do anything that they feel might put them in jeopardy? So what's the pitch for that type of company, since a lot of our viewers are unfortunately existing in those environments?
Yeah, no, I think the concerns that pharmaceutical companies have, pretty much every organization has. It's obviously the financial industry has security concerns. Government and the government clients that we've talked to have the same issues. And pharmaceutical companies, obviously, there's a lot of, and we've actually been working with some continuing medical education companies that do physician education. And they have the same, everyone's kind of got the same nervousness around information. I think what has helped, well, I think there's two issues. One is just the devices, that there are IT concerns around data security. And we've been dealing with that for years and years, not because of IT, but because in the pharmaceutical industry, everything's so heavily regulated as far as messaging and not wanting to put people's health at risk. So that's a valid concern. And for years, they've had the multi-tiered medical, legal, and regulatory reviews of all content, which has always been a very interesting process to go through, and often stripped out a lot of the flavor and interestingness of e-learning in general, even before, we were talking about alternate reality games. So there's the content side, which is, how do we keep our data secure? And then there's the device side, which is what technologies do our people have available to them. So when we're looking at designing games, obviously we have to look at both. Is what we're designing, how can we design a game to be played and be accessible by the people who need to be playing it? And one of the interesting lessons learned when we designed the ARG for the Siege conference was it was a games conference, and the assumption was that, here are a bunch of people who are very technology savvy and gamers, and they're going to a games conference, and we're going to design a game for them, and we're going to use augmented reality. So they're going to be cutting edge. we got to the conference, and about 2/3 of the attendees of the conference didn't have smartphones, which was a bit of a shock. But if you think about the demographics, a lot of the people at the game conference were in their early 20s or just gotten out of college. They were looking for jobs, and they couldn't actually afford smartphones. So one of the lessons learned coming out of that design experience was that you really need to understand that and design for the technologies that the people who are playing your game will have accessible and available to them. The cool workaround at that conference was that people would team up with other people who did have smartphones, so there were bands of groups of people roaming around the conference playing the game together, but it was unintended consequence. So that wasn't designed into it. So for our corporate clients, we really do a technology analysis and look at, okay, what devices are people using on an everyday basis? Do they have access to certain sites? How can we enable the gameplay? And from the content side, I think you have to be very, very smart about what the subject matter is that you're dealing with, the storyline that you develop around that content, because most of these games are based around a storyline that you're playing through, and you're playing a character in this game, and making sure that if it's a serious topic or if it's an issue with very serious consequences attached to the learning objectives, that you're treating the subject matter appropriately in that context. So, if you're talking about a sales environment and you want the application of the skills and I'm thinking of the Constellation Academy of Wine game that we developed. We created customers that as closely reflected as we could the actual customers and environments that they would be facing when they went out to sell their products. And all of the situations that we created and the scenarios that came up during the game were all very realistic scenarios that sales reps would typically have to deal with. In pharmaceutical, though, one of the challenges for us or things to think about is, do you want to develop a game around a particular product? Or are you designing games around skills that are outside of a particular product promotion? So are you teaching people about better communication skills and communication with customers and those types of topic areas, or are you very focused on a particular product? And your game design and how you create those dynamics will vary depending on what the subject matter is and the learning goals of the game.
Do you find that you have to well, actually, I think this question might have been answered, but Justin was asking, do you need to have a cell phone in order for it to be classified as augmented reality?
I think so. I haven't seen, I mean, there are other devices that you can use, but I don't think they're widespread. I mean, obviously the government and military are using augmented reality glasses and other things that can do data overlays. But I would say, 99% of the AR augmented reality applications I've seen have been through phones.
Yeah. Most of the ones I participated in, I think, as well. What model of instructional design? Well, I'm sorry, am I talking over you?
Right now, mobile is really the leader in the augmented reality space.
I'm sorry, you cut out on that one. Who's the leader?
Delays.
Karine, can you hear us?
The audio keeps delaying.
Okay. Who was the leader in the augmented reality realm?
Now I can. Yep.
Skype's not cooperating.
No, one of the problems with live TV is that we sometimes get these glitches.
We didn't hear who you said the leader was in augmented reality.
Well, we're getting her video feed, but we've lost her audio.
Karine, can you hear us? No, I'm not sure she's hearing us. Karine, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm hearing about every other word.
About every other word? Okay.
Oh, there, you're back.
Okay. Who did you say the leader was in augmented reality?
Oh, the mobile industry.
the mobile industry on the whole?
Yeah, I mean, right now, so the panel that I was on last fall, I was the only non-technical person. Despite my throwing around of all these crazy technologies, I'm actually not. I'm the design person, not the technology person. But I was on a panel with two gentlemen who were working at Augmented Reality Labs, and the types of things that they were designing and building were all for your use through mobile technologies and specifically phones. And unfortunately, a lot of the demos that they were showing me were first-person shooter games, which are infinitely less interesting to me for learning than a lot of the other applications or things that we could do. But in the entertainment industry, which is where a lot of the technology advancement is driven through, first-person shooter games sell. So it was a little disconcerting to me that it was going to convert people's cell phones into these augmented reality guns that they were shooting targets with, but the technology capabilities and what they were working on as far as targeting and control and being able to focus images and the types of environments that they were able to create, because they're kind of pushing for these games, are all technologies that we're going to be able to use for learning design purposes shortly after they're released for the entertainment industry. Most of the presentations that I give talking about the future of learning, I run around and I play most of all the new video games to see. My favorite is the Xbox Kinect right now, because it's amazing. You don't have anything, just you're the controller. So thinking about how technology is advancing, especially in augmented reality, right now it looks like mobile devices are going to be our kind of window or ticket into those learning experiences.
Karine, a lot of the people watching this are instructional designers or people involved in e-learning. What would you recommend as a way to get educated in learning how to write for a virtual reality or for an augmented learning kind of game?
That's a great question.
What kind of training would you recommend that they get, aside from playing games, which does teach to a certain point?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question, and I think a really, really relevant one. So most instructional design programs do not focus on or do much with experiential learning or how to design for experiential learning. And when we really started focusing on leveraging new technologies for learning, we started going to all the games conferences. So GDC, Game Developers Conference, is going on this week. GDC Austin, which is more of the interactive conference in the fall. We spent a good year and a half going to all of those conferences and going to all of the sessions and learning about how game designers were designing experiences to engage players. And the goal of games, which is different from instructional design, so instructional design typically is designed for a person to play through or go through a module one time, hopefully get all the information they need, practice a few times, what they need, what they're supposed to be learning, and then take an assessment. And hopefully they show in the assessment that you learned what you're supposed to learn. Game design and game designers are designing experiences to get people to play over and over and over again for incremental improvements in skill, which is very different. And hard, I think, for some instructional designers to wrap their brains around the difference between designing for incremental improvement through repeated practice and wanting someone to go through an e-learning module and have mastered whatever the subject is after going through it. So I would recommend for people who are interested in more experiential design or designing for these immersive environments, there's two models. There's game design models, And game designers use a completely different tool set than instructional designers, and I think it's important to understand how they think about motivation